Why is this Marine still in jail? The judge's voice echoed across the silent courtroom. Heads turned. Some whispered. Others froze in place. No one had expected what came next. It was just another day on the court calendar, one of dozens of cases scheduled. The judge had seen everything. Theft, assault, fraud, drug cases. He flipped through case files one by one, calling names like clockwork. But then he paused. There was something different about this one. The file in front of him was thick. Too thick. Pages stacked with reports, delays, postponements, and hearing reschedules. It belonged to Sergeant Daniel Reyes, a name that immediately struck a chord. The judge looked up at the man standing before him. Head shaved, eyes steady, posture upright despite wearing a faded orange jumpsuit and shackles around his wrists. "State your name," the judge said. "Daniel Reyes, sir." "And you are?" The judge hesitated, flipping to the front of the file. "Former U.S. Marine Corps?" "Yes, Your Honor. 2 tours in Afghanistan. 1 in Iraq." "A Bronze Star recipient?" The judge read aloud, eyebrows rising. "Yes, sir." The judge took a long breath. "And you've been in jail? How long?" 14 months, Your Honor," Daniel replied calmly. The courtroom was dead silent. The judge's eyes scanned the paperwork, flipping back and forth in disbelief. He turned to the clerk, then to the prosecutor. "This can't be right. Why is this man still in custody?" No answer. He turned to the young public defender at Daniel's side. "Counsel, explain this." Now, the defense attorney, Lisa Hart, stood up, visibly nervous but composed. "Your Honor, we've been trying for over a year to have this case reviewed. Mr. Reyes has been denied bail due to a prior misdemeanor on his record. The charges stem from an incident where he attempted to stop a violent altercation in his neighborhood. He acted in defense of another resident who was being attacked. There were multiple witnesses. But what?" The judge cut in. The prosecution filed continuances. Evidence has been slow to come in. The case has been delayed repeatedly. Meanwhile, my client has remained in custody. Without trial. Without conviction. The judge slammed the file shut. He looked directly at the prosecutor. "I need an answer. Right now. How does a U.S. veteran, who risked his life for this country, get forgotten in a jail cell for over a year without a fair trial?" The prosecutor stammered. "Your Honor, the case is complicated." "Complicated?" the judge repeated. "You've had 14 months. This isn't complicated. It's shameful." Everyone in the courtroom knew something major was about to happen. You could feel the energy shift. The bailiff straightened up. The court reporter's fingers hovered over her keys. Daniel Reyes, still calm, said nothing. His silence spoke volumes. He wasn't expecting sympathy. He wasn't expecting freedom. He had gotten used to disappointment. But this time, something was different. The judge leaned forward, locking eyes with Daniel. "Sergeant Reyes," he said slowly, "I don't know how this happened, but I promise you this stops today." It was the first time in over a year that Daniel heard someone say they believed him. What happened next would shake the courtroom, and soon the nation. Before orange jumpsuits and courtroom glares, Daniel Reyes wore the uniform of the United States Marine Corps, a uniform earned through grit, sacrifice, and blood. He enlisted right out of high school, determined to serve something greater than himself. Like many young men from small towns, Daniel had few options. College wasn't on the table, but the Marines offered discipline, purpose, and a brotherhood that no other job could offer. And Daniel thrived in it. He served 2 tours in Afghanistan, 1 in Iraq, and was part of multiple operations that saved both American and civilian lives. His record was spotless. Commendations stacked up. He was known as the guy who always had your back. Calm under pressure. Fiercely loyal. A natural leader. When he returned home, he didn't come back the same man. His body was intact. But his mind? That was different. Like many veterans, Daniel faced silent battles. PTSD, nightmares, anxiety, a constant sense that danger was always around the corner. He tried to bury it. He got a job as a mechanic. He kept his head down. But life after war isn't something you can adjust to overnight. He joined a support group for veterans. That helped. But resources were stretched thin, and mental health services for vets were underfunded and overwhelmed. Daniel started to feel like he had been trained to fight for his country, but now no one was fighting for him. And then came the night that would change everything. It was late, past 11:30 p.m. Daniel was home after a long shift when he heard shouting outside his apartment. A woman's scream pierced the quiet night. Instinct kicked in. He grabbed his shoes and rushed outside. A man was attacking a woman near the stairwell. Neighbors were yelling. Someone was filming. Others were too afraid to get involved. But Daniel wasn't. He stepped in without hesitation. He shouted at the attacker to stop. When that didn't work, he grabbed him and pulled him away. A struggle broke out. Punches were thrown. The man tried to run, but Daniel restrained him until the police arrived. That should have been the end of it. But when officers arrived, the attacker had a bloodied nose and a fractured jaw. The woman was too shaken to speak clearly. Daniel stood there, hands up, explaining what happened. But the officers saw a big, muscular man, military background, history of combat, and a badly injured suspect. And in that moment, things went sideways. He was arrested on the spot for aggravated assault. No one interviewed witnesses. No one checked the neighbor's phone footage. He was booked, fingerprinted, and locked up. His prior record? A misdemeanor from over a decade ago. A bar fight in his early 20s. Nothing serious. But it gave the DA just enough to deny bail. Just like that, Daniel went from war hero to inmate. He waited for justice. Days turned to weeks. Weeks to months. His public defender filed motions, but they were buried in backlog. Witnesses moved away. The neighbor's footage was lost, and no one seemed in a hurry to fix it. Behind bars, Daniel kept himself. He read. He exercised. He wrote letters to his family that he never sent. He thought maybe, eventually, someone would realize the truth. But the system didn't care about truth. It cared about process. Until that day in court, when a single question from a judge cracked the silence. Why is this Marine still in jail? Those 7 words would trigger a chain of events no one saw coming. The silence in the courtroom was thick, uncomfortable. Everyone could feel it. Judge Walters had just asked the question no one could answer. Why is this Marine still in jail? What followed wasn't just legal procedure. It was the beginning of something extraordinary. The prosecutor, a man known for being sharp and unflinching, suddenly looked unsure. He cleared his throat, adjusted his tie, and tried to maintain composure. Your Honor, he began, this case has complexities. The judge held up his hand. Spare me the buzzwords. 14 months, no trial. A decorated veteran behind bars without bail. How is that anything but a failure of this court? The defense attorney, Lisa Hart, looked up from her notes. She had been fighting for Daniel Reyes for nearly a year, mostly unnoticed. Underpaid, overworked, but determined. This moment, this judge, felt different. She stood slowly, her voice steady but full of fire. Your Honor, Mr. Reyes acted to protect another human being. That's what Marines do. He responded to a woman being attacked and restrained the assailant until police arrived. Multiple witnesses at the scene confirmed this. Yet, he was arrested while the actual aggressor was treated as the victim. The real tragedy? None of this ever went to trial. The judge narrowed his eyes. What about the video? Lisa shook her head. Gone. Misplaced, apparently. We've requested it multiple times, but the footage never made it into discovery. The neighbor who recorded it moved to another state. But there are written witness statements. She handed the judge a file she had brought to every hearing, ignored each time before. He opened it, reading quietly. His face changed as he flipped each page. Let me get this straight, the judge said slowly. Your office had access to this testimony and still kept him in custody. The prosecutor shifted uncomfortably. The case required additional investigation. The judge leaned forward, his voice sharp. No, what required was basic human decency. He turned to Daniel, who remained quiet through it all, stoic, respectful, but with the weight of months in his cell etched into his expression. Mr. Reyes, do you understand why you've been held this long? Daniel spoke for the first time that day, his voice calm but firm. Because I didn't run. I stood my ground. I believed the truth would come out. That was when the judge did something no one expected. He stood. This court has failed you, he said, voice rising. And more importantly, this system has failed you. You're a Marine, a citizen, a man who acted to protect someone else. And we treated you like a criminal, without evidence, without justice, and without urgency." He slammed the file shut. "I won't allow this to continue." The courtroom held its breath. "I am ordering your immediate release, today, before sundown, and I will be contacting the district attorney personally about how this case was handled." A beat passed, then gasps. Daniel didn't move. His mind was still catching up. After over a year of hoping, of doubting, of being forgotten, freedom came in a single moment. The bailiff looked stunned. Even the clerk wiped away a tear. And just like that, everything changed. But what no one knew was that this wasn't just the end of a wrongful imprisonment. It was the start of a national reckoning. Because as powerful as that moment was, what happened after Daniel walked out of that courtroom would be even more shocking. With a bang of the gavel, Judge Walters made it clear, release this man. Today, everyone sat frozen for a moment. The courtroom wasn't used to this kind of raw honesty, especially not from the bench. Even Daniel looked unsure, like he was waiting for someone to tell him it was a mistake. But it wasn't. The bailiff walked over and gently removed the handcuffs from Daniel's wrists. He didn't flinch. He just looked down, rubbing the red marks left behind, quietly processing the fact that, for the first time in over a year, he was no longer an inmate. And then came the twist no one saw coming. Judge Walters didn't just stop at Daniel's case. After a short recess, he returned to the bench with a fiery speech that no one expected to make headlines, but it did. "I will be contacting the governor's office, the Department of Veterans Affairs, and the State Bar Association to investigate this matter," the judge declared. "This is not an isolated incident. I fear there are dozens, maybe hundreds of veterans across this country who are suffering the same fate. Ignored, forgotten, mishandled by a system that they once risked their lives to protect." Cameras from the local news were already waiting outside. When the doors to the courthouse opened and Daniel stepped out, dressed now in donated clothes, still stunned by his freedom, flashes erupted. But he wasn't met with just lights. He was met with people. His sister ran into his arms sobbing. Veterans from the local community stood holding flags, some saluting. Others held signs that read "Justice for Daniel" and "No Vet Left Behind." Some of them were strangers who had followed the story online. Others were fellow Marines who had served with him years ago and never forgot him. And then came the media questions. "Daniel, what does it feel to be free? What would you say to the system that locked you away? Are you angry?" But Daniel didn't lash out. Instead, he spoke with the same calm strength that had carried him through war, and then through wrongful imprisonment. "I'm grateful to be free," he said, "but I'm not the only one. There are more like me, men and women who wore the uniform and were left behind. We have to do better." Those words, "we have to do better," went viral within hours. Clips of a judge's outrage and Daniel's quiet dignity began spreading across social media like wildfire. Influencers, politicians, veterans organizations, and celebrities began sharing his story. Some compared it to a modern-day David and Goliath, one man up against a broken system. In just 48 hours, hashtags like hashtag Justice for Daniel, hashtag Free Our Vets, and hashtag Fix the System began trending across the country. But the most surprising part? Daniel didn't retreat into private life after getting his freedom. Instead, he stepped forward into the spotlight, not for fame, but for purpose. He sat down for interviews, met with lawmakers, and began working with legal aid groups. He talked about PTSD, about systemic failures, and about how even heroes can become invisible if no one pays attention. What started as one man's quiet release from jail had now become a national conversation. The judge had unknowingly pulled the first thread. Now the whole fabric of a flawed system was beginning to unravel. And Daniel Reyes? He was no longer just a Marine or an inmate or even a survivor. He was quickly becoming a symbol of hope, of courage, and of the fight for justice that doesn't end when the battle overseas is done, but begins all over again at home. For most people, the story would have ended the moment they stepped out of jail. They'd go home, hug their families, maybe try to forget the nightmare they just lived through. But Daniel Reyes wasn't most people. Just days after his release, As news of his story swept across the internet and into living rooms across America, Daniel sat in front of a camera in a small, crowded studio. No makeup, no rehearsed lines, just raw truth. He looked straight into the lens and said, "I don't want pity. I want change. Not just for me, for every veteran still sitting behind bars forgotten." And just like that, his story became something bigger than himself. A movement is born. Daniel launched a nonprofit called Second Mission. The name reflected a powerful idea, that coming home from war isn't the end of service. It's the beginning of a second fight. A fight for healing. A fight for dignity. A fight for justice. Within a month, Second Mission had raised thousands in donations from supporters across the country. Volunteers poured in. Some were veterans, some were lawyers, and some were just people who felt the same outrage the judge had felt when he slammed his gavel and asked, "Why is this Marine still in jail?" Daniel and his team got to work. They reviewed case files of incarcerated veterans. They found men and women jailed for minor offenses, denied bail, misdiagnosed with mental health issues, or left without legal representation. Some had spent years in prison for crimes they didn't commit. Others had simply gotten lost in the system, just like Daniel. With help from volunteer attorneys and law students, Second Mission began filing appeals, reopening cases, and most importantly, giving veterans a voice. From Courtroom to Capitol Hill, Daniel wasn't interested in politics. He was interested in results. But when lawmakers began reaching out, inviting him to speak at panels and hearings, he showed up, not in a suit, not with talking points, but with truth. In one hearing, a senator asked him, "What would you say to the people who let this happen to you?" Daniel's response was calm and direct. "I'd say it's not about me anymore. It's about the thousands of veterans who are treated like case numbers instead of people. You trained us to fight. Now, let us fight for each other." His testimony made headlines. Clips of his speeches were shared on every major news outlet. One military blogger even wrote, "Daniel Reyes isn't just a Marine. He's becoming the voice for a generation of forgotten warriors." Impact beyond the headlines. But Daniel didn't want to be a celebrity. In fact, after every public appearance, he returned to the same humble office, bare walls, secondhand furniture, and a whiteboard filled with names of vets still waiting for help. He spent his days working case by case, phone call by phone call. He personally spoke to families of incarcerated veterans. He visited prisons. He met with therapists and social workers to create better reentry programs for vets who had done their time. One of the first veterans he helped free was Mark Hollister, a former Army medic who had been locked up for nearly 2 years over a technical parole violation. Daniel met Mark the day he was released. The two embraced, and Mark said through tears, "You saved me, brother. I thought the world forgot about me." Stories like Mark's became the real mission for Daniel. His nonprofit wasn't about fame or headlines. It was about action, changing the system one story at a time. As Second Mission grew, its impact spread to police departments, courtrooms, and even law schools. Some states began adopting veterans treatment courts, special courtrooms that offer therapy and community service instead of prison time for nonviolent offenses committed by veterans suffering from PTSD or other service-related conditions. And at the heart of it all was Daniel. He remained humble, always focused, still haunted by the time he lost, but grateful for the purpose it gave him. In an interview marking 1 year since his release, Daniel was asked, "If you could go back and erase what happened to you, would you?" He paused, then said, "Part of me wants to say yes. But honestly, no. Because if it didn't happen to me, I wouldn't be doing this. And maybe guys like Mark would still be in there. Maybe their stories would stay buried. I guess this was my second mission all along." A message to us all. Daniel Reyes' story is no longer just his own. It's the story of every veteran who returns home to a country that forgets the war doesn't end when the uniform comes off. It's the story of a broken system and the people fighting to fix it. And now, it's also your story because you've heard it. So the question is, what will you do with it?